What's an insurer's worst nightmare?
Climate change.
This is Real Talk, FinTech Trailblazers.
Brought to you by MESSION in collaboration with the Singapore FinTech Association. Hi, welcome to Real Talk FinTech Trailblazers series by MESSION in collaboration with the Singapore FinTech Association, supported by the InsurTech Subcommittee. Here, we uncover the stories of visionary leaders, innovative entrepreneurs, and industry disruptors who are redefining the financial landscape. Joining me today in this series is my co-host from the Singapore FinTech Association, InsurTech Subcommittee Chair, Matthew Chu. So before we begin welcoming our guest, Matthew, right, can you share with us, with our viewers out there, what does the InsurTech Subcommittee in the Singapore FinTech Association do and what are their goals?
So the goals of the subcommittee is to foster the development and growth of the broad insurtech ecosystem in Singapore by working collaboratively with the various stakeholders in the industry in 4 key areas of focus. Number 1, engagement with the regulators. Number 2, engagement with the industry. Number 3, nurture the development of insurtech companies and the ecosystem. And number 4, talent development. So our guest today is no stranger to the cutting edge of innovation. Julien Condamines is the co-founder and chief strategic officer of Novo AI, where he's pioneering the use of AI to revolutionize the insurance industry. But that's not all. Julien's career is a whirlwind of creativity, strategy, and relentless problem solving, from his work with Google to founding the Co-Creation Lab, where he empowers organizations to solve complex challenges through design thinking. Julien has worn many hats in the world of entrepreneurship.
And did we mention that he's also an entrepreneur in residence at the French Embassy in Singapore? So this man has preached international innovation and tech collaboration like few others have. In this episode, we are going to uncover his journey and share his stories of resilience, strategies for growth, and most importantly, his insights on how entrepreneurs can thrive in today's fast-changing world of AI and FinTech. Welcome, Julien, to our podcast.
Welcome, Julien. Hi,
Thanks,
hi.
guys. Very happy to be here.
Hey.
Thank you very much for joining us, man. Can you tell us more about yourself and Nova AI?
Sure. Where do I start? So I'm Julien Condamines. I'm a French guy, born and raised in France. I've worked for 4 years in Google in Ireland. I moved with Google to Brazil, where I moved from sales to marketing. I was taking care of YouTube B2B marketing in Brazil. Then after another 2 years and a half with Google, I wanted to realize my dream of being an entrepreneur, but I didn't have funds, I didn't have network, I didn't have an idea, didn't have a co-founder, so I went to work for somebody else in a startup. I went to a few startups there. I was in São Paulo, eventually joined the company of a friend called Worldpackers, still out there, a travel company, but I wasn't one of the founders. So after a year and a half, I kind of like looked for something else, and I'd been giving design thinking training on the side. And the kind of like a side gig that grew a leg. And so before I knew it, I had a digital transformation firm that I launched in Brazil. I also met my wife in Brazil who dreamed of discovering Asia. And so 7 years ago, we decided to move to Asia, where I relaunched the company. I did a stint at the French Embassy for a year as a contractor. And then I'd been running the digital transformation firm for that time. 2 years back after COVID, I got out of COVID or the pandemic a bit tired of consulting, and I wanted to do something else. Market was hard as well, which helped me think about something else. I wanted to grow again and be closer to building products. And so I found one of the company had a case where I could use Gen AI. I called an old buddy of mine, Gilbert, who was doing prompt engineering at the time, and we joined forces and we launched Novo AI. Nice. And Novo AI claims to be, and claims is a pun intended, transforming the insurance industry one claim at a time. And what we're doing, we're automating all the tedious, laborious processes that the insurance industry is facing, and there's many of them. So we have a long road ahead, but we've already deployed the solution regionally with our first client, and we started to work with some of the big names of the industry.
Nice.
Well, that's in case of audience out there, right? As I was researching on Julien, his resume on LinkedIn was very, very long. He managed to summarize it in 3 minutes or so. That's wow. You had a good practice.
Right? Yeah. So I'm curious, why your career has been largely on marketing, a little bit of tech, but why insurance?
It has not been on insurance at all, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And if you had told me that I would work in insurance 3 years ago, I would probably have laughed at you. But I think the way I like to position is we're actually a tech company helping the insurance industry.
Okay.
More than what InsurTech usually stands for. A lot of people see InsurTech as the distribution of insurance product online. And we're actually focusing on the back end. So if all goes well, clients of the insurance industry will never know we exist, but they will have their experience improving a lot. And so I come from the tech industry, Gilbert as well. He's an actual tech guy while I'm a business guy in the tech industry. And we found a problem that was just like very fun to solve. So, and the more we work on it, there's no way to make an insurance claim sexy, but working on it is actually super interesting.
Are you able to share a little bit more in depth about what you're working on?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So we started by actually taking the claims and understanding. So as I said, I've been working with design thinking for 15 years, which is a big word for human-centered design and creative problem solving by taking the user at the center of the equation. So what we've done at the beginning when we saw there was problems solving the claims, we sat down with the teams actually managing the claims inside the insurance company we were working for. And we looked at all the friction points that they were having. And the first one was capturing the data. Second one was putting those data into a system that was 300 years old. And then from there, somebody else had to open that and open every single document again and look into a very old interface. And they had to make some notes and eventually approve, refuse the claim, make some follow-up. And in the meantime, someone wasn't paid for the claim, right? And so we decided to turn that into something much less clunky. Basically, we get those documents in the form of paper or scan, and we skip every single step after that. We capture the data, we organize it for the insurance industry, we map it to the coverage and cover codes of the insurers, and now we even detect the inconsistencies of the claim to help them detect fraud, abuse, waste, everything they shouldn't be paying for, basically.
And all these comes from Gen AI to detect all these things?
So it's not just GI and as everything else, right? Like the technology is a tool, right? So the technology doesn't do anything by itself. But we use a blend of OCR or smart OCR, if you want, like a bit of computer vision blend into it. But that helps you extract the data, but that doesn't make any sense out of it.
Yes.
That's where Gen AI comes into play, where Gen AI is able to read and understand text the same way you would, or not only text, actually any type of unstructured data. And so it helps organize this data and make sense of it, and then look for inconsistencies into very large volume of text and numbers and tables and all sort of different data.
Right. So the things I know when I was looking through, or rather listening to what you just said and all, I'm very curious because you have been in Singapore for about less than 2-3 years?
No, I've been here for 7 years.
7 years! Oh, wow! Yeah. 7 years. Okay, so that said, with 7 years, why on insurance claim? Because that is so niche. Unless you have insurance and you had a claim payout that didn't go through.
You were pissed.
No, so I went through the opposite door. Right? I had an insurance client. And I was actually doing advisory for the executive committee of that company.
Okay.
And one of my like the way we started working on together was the first one was to sensibilize them to what it is to take a human-centered approach to their industry. And they wanted to differentiate. They wanted to understand how to improve their bottom line. And so I did a market research and I realized that the insurance industry is not exactly the most loved industry in the world, which means there's very exciting opportunities for entrepreneurs. And then when I brought that to them, like we actually made a list of all the possible ways to improve the way they were doing business, right? And one of them, which was not a priority at all, was really ripe for Gen AI cases because it was actually linked to the fact that they had a bunch of unstructured data. And so that's where I started learning about insurance and really diving in and living and breathing insurance for the last 2-3 years now to try and understand and get up to speed to this, but also working hand in hand with people that know the industry better than me. And what we bring to the party is really the understanding of tech and what tech can do for them in this side.
So if it was not insurance, if it was not claims, what other vertical will you look into?
Yeah.
You mean other?
Because you researched on insurance as a whole, right?
Yeah. So what we do, we started with the claim because that's an entry door that we can tackle. But the very first prototype was actually a conversational chatbot.
Yes, chatbot. Okay.
That would extract data from insurance policies and provide answers either to someone internally that would be working as a customer support or either directly to the client. But then when we showed that case to the client, they loved it. They understood the value of it. But say we have an actual bigger problem, which is linked to the claim management. And then we started digging into that problem. And if you think about it, insurance industry in Asia, it's over $2 trillion per year and growing. 65% of that money, and so that's what they charge in premium, right? But 65% of that money is spent on paying the claims. So $2 out of $3 of the insurance industry is spent paying the claims. And on that part, you have 15 to 35% of fraud, abuse, and waste, which means we're actually working on the biggest pain point that the industry has. If we manage to solve even a very little part of that, that's already amounting to millions for the insurance industry.
Wow.
So this is actually a key component in claims, fraud, abuse, and waste. Maybe you can explain a little bit to the viewers out there. What do they actually mean?
Yeah, of course. So that falls into what the insurance called leakage. Leakage is basically everything that goes out of your claim payment that shouldn't be paid in the first place, right? And so fraud is you and I added a zero to our claim, right? Like I went to the GP, it cost me $100, add a zero and it's $1,000, right? That's a fraud. You're not supposed to do that. Don't do that.
Yeah, please don't.
Abuse is another very common one, not only in Singapore, but the rest of Asia is, and throughout the world, but it's even more relevant in Asia. Abuse is basically selling services on purpose that are not covered by the insurance. So if you go to the hospital and you have like, it's a broken leg or something quite important, instead of just paying for your expenses, the hospital will call the insurance and will ask them if they will cover everything. So they ask for letter of guarantee, pre-authorization to perform some procedures.
Yes.
And then they'll do a bunch of exams, medication, you'll see a bunch of specialists and all that, and eventually you'll come out of the hospital cured, but with a bill that's very big and that's sent to your insurance, they have to pay for it. Within this, there's a lot of abuse. Abuse being over-medication, so you get 3 different drugs that do the same job. Overcharging procedures, so procedures that you don't actually need. Either they're X-rays that you didn't need in the first place, either surgery that was way too premature to perform. Either you stayed at the hospital way too long, for instance. So all of those actually add up and get into your invoice where they shouldn't. And the last one is waste, is basically you're being paid back for something that's not covered in your insurance policy. So no one is responsible, but the insurance, which doesn't have the time to go deep enough in the claims. Right? And all of those stuff are actually money that the insurance industries are bleeding for lack of bandwidth and the right tools to actually get into it and look at the details and identify them.
So I'm curious because as a practitioner, we always look at abuse, and the question that we have is who is to say that this is covered and should not be prescribed? So how does the Gen AI or how does your solution, right, come and look into this space specifically? Like this particular medication, right? I think it's overprescribed. So how do we come to a conclusion that it's not overprescribed or it is overprescribed?
Yeah. So there's different ways to look at it, right? But for the health industry, for instance, you have that's at the same time the hairiest and the easiest. Hairiest because that's one of the most complex business line, but it's also the easiest because that's the most normalized. The World Health Organization has published something called ICD codes, ICD-10 codes. ICD is International Coding Treatment or something like that. I forgot the exact name, but it's basically a list of the 70,000 diagnoses that exist out there. Right? And so every time you go see a doctor, there's a diagnosis and there is a code attached to it. But no one uses it in Asia, or very, very, very much anymore. In the US, for instance, if an hospital wants to be paid this claim, they have to actually code the claim. So people actually pay to codify the claim. Here in Asia, it's not used. And so what Gen AI is capable of doing is like looking at the diagnosis and inferring the diagnosis. So they look at the documentation, all the claim documentation, say, all right.
And they refer
so this is you have a skin rash, but with no complication. The code is G6053. Just made that up. And if you have complication, that's G5065, right? That's another one. And so because of that, and then attached to that, you'll have certain procedures that are linked to this type of condition, right? So if you have a broken leg, you'll do an X-ray. If you don't have a broken leg, an X-ray is completely useless. Yes. And then from there, you'll get medication as well, right? But there's a lot of bibliography out there on medication and on medication. So if I get 3 drugs that are doing the same job for the same condition, then 2 of them are superfluous.
Yes.
Why do I get 3 drugs that are doing the same thing?
Yes.
And yet the hospital prescribe them? Or why do I get a medication for COVID when I just had like an infectious respiratory condition?
Yeah.
When it's not proven, I've done a test and I don't have COVID, so I shouldn't have a drug for COVID, right? So it's easy to actually work backward and identify what's not related to that. And then there's another case, which is overpricing. I'm charging you too much for the medication. And this is based on the number of data that you have. If everyone is charging you 10, why is this hospital charging you 30?
Okay.
So yeah, there's different ways to do that. For motors, the same. Like you scratch the rear bumper of your Tesla, it should be between 200 and 300 for the piece, and then like 2 hours of labor.
Yeah.
If you're being charged $13,000, there's something wrong with it.
Yeah.
So if it's slightly over the price, okay. If it's way over range, there's something off.
Okay.
I mean, with Singapore rising costs, it sounds totally exciting because I think this will be able to help curb some of the costs and all. Maybe our insurance will be cheaper in terms of premiums in time to come. But I'm very curious because I think you're in this project, right? What is the estimated, projection, right, for a insurance company to save this kind of costs on overall? Because you talk about, overcharges. You talk about, tree medication, things like that, fraud, abuse.
Yep.
What's the percentage that you think they can save the company for?
But it's always the same, right? Like the first time you start working on a problem that's never been fixed before, the delta is actually pretty big.
Right.
So we're confident we can improve the situation, but at least 10% pretty easily.
Wow.
Because again, like it's like, I don't know, like anything you take and you didn't have data before, and all of a sudden you have data and you start looking into it.
So there's a huge,
there's
huge improvement.
There's a huge improvement.
Yes.
First, you clear the way for like, okay, all of those they're clean. You don't even have to spend time on that. So you clear the agenda of everyone that's been working on that. So our first client, they had a team of 10 people. 7 of them has been reallocated to doing something else.
Oh,
and so doing something else. No, they actually still have a job. So nothing that, but they have a job that's much more interesting now. Instead of just capturing data and doing like
administrative
stuff all the same.
Yeah,
right.
They're actually spending time on the claims that are suspicious. So they're looking into them and looking at what we've highlighted for them. We told them like, hey, there's this, and this, and they look into it and they'll start looking at whether the people should be paid back or not.
Okay.
But for the right reasons, right?
Yeah. So to our viewers out there, right, in case, right, you're wondering, right, how much can 10% save? It's millions and millions of dollars, especially in the insurance industry.
For any insurance out there, even like not a big one, 1% is already millions.
Yeah, exactly. So now let's go back to how you started off with Nova, right? I think with Nova AI, when you had this problem in mind and things like that, was it hard to convince the insurers and all to even work on this? Because like I say, it's something that's been there for the longest time. Was it hard?
Yeah, so I've worked with many industries, and I can say that insurance industry is the fastest moving, right? So it's pretty conservative, it's quite regulated, and one of the reasons why it hasn't done its digital transformation as fast as others, because it's still working a lot on paper based data. And so that means like the interfaces, the systems are getting old and they're quite hard. So it takes a long time. It's very long sales cycle. People are conservative. A lot of the people have been in the industry for a long time, and we're kind of like new kids on the block there. So you need time to build trust, and you need time to actually build your legitimacy, right? So the first part was actually trying to get in the room and talk to people working in the insurance industry. And it took us a while to actually realize that there's no point going and selling the product. No one wants to hear about you, and they think like they've already seen it 10 times, like talking about OCR, for instance. OCR has been around the block for a long time. And for the last 10 years, people have been saying like OCR can do magic for the insurance industry. Truth is, OCR doesn't work that well with the insurance industry in Asia. And so now when you come and you say, we have a solution that uses a bit of OCR, no, I've seen that before, it doesn't work. Like it's already implemented, we don't use it, we don't need it, it's already working.
I think the key is not just OCR, it's the pairing with Gen AI, right? That is key, right?
But because it's an industry where a lot of the people are not very tech savvy, they just jump to conclusion. And a lot of them don't actually understand the potential that Gen AI can do. They've seen it in the news like everybody else, but they're like, I don't see how ChatGPT can help me with my job.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of like the conclusion. So unless you go and you do a demo showing exactly how it solved their problem, you're never going to go any further. But then you need to get that first demo in, right?
Yeah. So speaking of linking out to the layman's out there, right? What's OCR?
Okay, that's a good question. OCR is
and Gen AI.
Gen AI.
So OCR optical character recognition. It's basically a camera that managed to extract the character on any piece of paper. Right. So anything that's not coming right away in your email, could be a PDF, could be a scan or anything, and just like manage to get the text and turn it into computerized text. But that's all it does. It extracts the data, but it doesn't have the ability to do anything else with it.
Yeah.
Just like a camera, you can show the picture, but this picture doesn't bring any value and doesn't allow you to use the data. GenAI is a substract of AI, so generative AI, generative artificial intelligence. It's a substract of data that first has already been trained on a very large amount of data. Right? So the AI comes from the large language model, and so the AI is capable of understanding the language that we're using. So not as a reasoning entity, it's not a living computer, but it's a computer that has the ability of making sense of the text that we read as humans. And GenAI is a module that helps you actually use that to make application out of it.
Nice.
Without training it again and again and again, because it's already been trained. And the way it works is basically by giving instruction on what to look for and fine-tuning it and teaching it how to do better. That's a bit simplified, but that's where we are.
So for people out there, right, I got the expert to simplify two very complicated things.
Yes, that's actually a very good explanation of both OCR as well as GenAI.
Yeah, it is.
So for the tech people out there, this is a simplification so that we can understand the concept of it. Like
it's for our layman audience out there who simplify things and understand it.
So I'm curious, right? Singapore has now positioned, now moving to your company. Singapore has positioned itself as a fintech hub. Right? How do you think partnerships like yours, or companies like yours, with partnership with the FinTech Association, right, is critical to advancing this particular position globally?
Yeah. So, what the first stage is the FinTech Association acts as a middle entity that connects the industry together, right? So, the struggle that startups in every industry has to actually talk to large groups and come together is obvious, right? And when you have an entity who's focusing on actually bringing the regulator, the large companies and the small companies together to actually make progress faster, then it really helps, right? And it's a trusted entity because everyone actually trusts it and because you have representatives from all of them, right? So an example was we had an event last week organized by the insurance subcommittee.
Yeah.
And thanks to that, we met a couple of senior execs from large insurance company. They didn't turn client overnight, right? Like we still have conversation, all that. But just the fact that we can talk to them and they see us and we come to the same room and we're all part of the same club, so to speak. Yeah. That's already accelerating the whole process, and that brings people together and increase the knowledge of the industry for the tech solution that existed there.
Okay.
So I'm curious because I think when we talk about tech, we are always fast forward, fast moving, like what you mentioned just now. Will there be any fears of people stealing ideas, or hey, actually he's doing this, or actually my company can do that too? I can repositioning my tech and take over their tech stuff or problem statement.
Actually, this is a concern, right? When the large companies they come and see what the ideas the startups have, there's always I can do it in house. So what is your take on that?
Well, yeah, but that's we've heard that for such a long time. Yeah. If large companies but that's kind of like the reason why startups are more innovative. They're more agile, they're more lean. They have a very small structure. They're very focused on one thing, and so they can move much faster. Right?
Yep.
Yes.
So the concern that large company can do it, yes, but that they're working on so many stuff at the same time. Like if I take the insurance industry, the IT department doesn't talk to the claim department, who doesn't talk to the CFO. Like they don't even understand each other's job, and they fail to talk to each other. I speak to my co-founder 3 or 4 times a day. So in our organization, business and product and tech speaks 4 times a day together, right. And we understand exactly what everyone is working on, right? In a large company, most of the time, people don't understand what people next door are doing.
Yep.
So that's kind of like, that's not a real concern in the sense, and I'm not criticizing it. Yeah. It's just much more specialized, and people have such larger focus that they can't have this kind of like laser focus and make progress so fast. And then you add the red tape and the politics internally and different agendas and different priorities of the business, and you just can't move fast. That's a reality of it.
So I think this is very powerful advice for startups out there to see what gap or value you can bring to the large MNCs or Yeah.
But then you need to understand the way that organization is the way it's working, right? So a lot of startups out there get frustrated because 3 hours for a startup is 3 weeks in large company time, right?
Yes,
so you need to understand the dynamic and the fact that the decision process is more complex and all that. And you can't change it, right? So you have to adapt to it because they're not going to change for you. And by the way, they don't care about you. Like they were making a lot of money before you existed, and they will continue once you're dead, right? And the chances are you're going to be dead before the large companies. So you need to adapt to that rhythm and understand it and kind of like try and find the point of friction so that you can turn your business into something sustainable.
So I'm curious, did this experience come from, or this insight come from an experience with your experience in Google?
So at Google, what
Is
I learned
Google fast? I mean, that's what we always hear.
I think it used to be much faster, but now it's a large company, and so it's facing a lot of those things. I'd say it's tech companies because they've been created after and they use a lot of the technology. They're kind of like a middle layer between very large conservative companies and startup, but they're definitely not startup and they don't move nearly as fast. But I think that there's something else that I want to address that I think is interesting when you said fearing of sharing the ideas and all that. First, I can share all the ideas that I have is cheap. Like until you execute on them, like they're worth nothing, right? And that'd be pretentious of me to pretend that we're the only one to think that we should improve the process, the claim processing thing. So even if we never talked about it out there, like there's probably like 10 people working on that at the same time. But there's a problem in the industry in the tech world that says no company ever died from the competition. You die from not serving the customers the best. Right? So if we do our job, we're super focused and we build something that has a lot of value for our target audience, then there's no reason we should die, right? And there might be other companies doing it and we might compete with them and have competing solutions, but we're never going to die if we serve our customers the best because eventually they won't want to go somewhere else because they're very satisfied with what we do. And so focusing on the fact that other people might be doing the same, that's pretty relevant.
So to everybody out there, right, who has fear of sharing their ideas, there you go, It's not about sharing ideas, it's making sure that your customers comes first, right? The ideas will actually help you generate more profits, right? And help you grow.
And do your homework. If you really know your customers and the problems and all that, then I can talk about ideas all day long. Like you're still missing those 6 months that I've spent like researching my customers. So and that we're not sharing in 5 minutes like that, right? So that's what makes the difference when you execute.
So on that topic, right, I'm curious now because I think you have a very extensive resume. Right? You went through a lot of things through Google and you came to a point in time where you want to start up your own companies with nothing and all. I'm very curious. I'm sure that's not your lowest point. What is your lowest point as an entrepreneur?
I've had so many. Well, I think the first one that I had as an entrepreneur was at the end of the first year that launched the consulting firm where I never had so many clients on paper, but I couldn't pay myself a salary because all of them were taking like 6 months to pay me. And I was like, how come I'm making so much business, but then I'm not getting paid, right?
Right.
And so I had to switch my focus, and that's probably like a beginner's mistake. I'm sure I'm not the only one to have done that, but some people will look at that like, haha, I know that. Because of course, like you're so focused on delivering value and all that, and you think everyone will pay you like on point, but then like you have like 30 days payment terms, and then 6 months later, you still don't have the money in the bank. And then you have to spend an amount of time that's incredible chasing the finance department who doesn't care about you because that's not their money and they don't realize that. And then you have like some companies telling you, oh, by the way, we won't pay you by 60 days now, we'll pay you by 90 days. And you're like, wait a minute, that makes a difference for me, like the small entrepreneurs. So I think the first one was definitely this one.
How do you deal with that?
How do you overcome that?
You reduce your expense for a month, but then you start chasing your clients and you make it really hard and you say like, okay, we're going to stop working with you if you don't do that. And by the way, we have a mission running, so we won't do any other work if you haven't paid that. And that still takes a while, and you use your ambassadors internally to kind of like put pressure internally. And then you change your term of payment after that. So from now on, no project will start without 50% payment at the signature.
So you learn from it.
And that means you're still going to be paid like 30 or 60 days afterward, but at least you've got some money coming pretty soon after you start working. So you learn from your mistake and you change the way, and you test different stuff as well. First time I sold the project, I was like super excited, and then I realized I super undersell it. And then because I was working with a large company at the time that I was making like just to make the contracts and sign them and all that, I wasn't even worth the project. So yeah, what's important is like you don't do it again, right? And you learn from that, and you kind of like, and that's not dramatic enough that you die from it, but that happens. Right?
Again, that's very powerful advice because most startups do not reach that point of payment terms, right? And then they don't understand that if someone takes long to pay you, it can actually kill.
Oh yeah, and that's one of the reasons. So that's something that I learned from my previous business, but it's one of the reasons why for Novo we actually charge for POC right away. So there's no work done until we get paid for the first pilot we do. Why? Because we have engineers working on that, and because also as long as like people don't value what they don't pay for.
Yeah.
Right.
If it's free, it doesn't have any value. If it doesn't have any value, no one cares internally. So we might be working on one of the toughest problem because they're not paying for it, they don't care.
Yeah.
Right. So to our viewers out there, right, POC stands for proof of concept.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But pilot could be the same, or like even like a first project, it doesn't matter. It's just if they're serious about that and it's a real problem, they should be able to pay for it.
Yeah, but will you ever reach, a roadblock where they don't see it as a problem and they just refuse to pay?
If they don't see it as a problem, that means your company doesn't have value in the first place. So it's one or two situations, right? It's either you're pitching your product poorly and you should learn to pitch better because they're not seeing it.
Right.
Or you should change the way you do it. So that's what we did. At the beginning, we wanted to sell it. Selling doesn't cut it with the insurance industry, at least from what I've seen so far. So we demo it. We demo it to the people that have the problem. And then we got into question. And then they're like, oh, no, I get it. How much does it cost, right? And when you get to this point, there's no selling anymore. They're like, all right, I understand the value of this and I want to buy this. How much does it cost? Can I actually afford for this?
The conversation change.
And the other option, if it's not you pitching it poorly, it's not a real problem. So you should pivot and do something else because it's never going to sell, right?
Yeah. So now I'm curious, the things that, have you ever doubted yourself in, any point in time that, hey, why am I still doing this? Because you did mention that there could be a point where the company is not doing the actual value that people are looking out for, right? Were there any point in time in your whole career that you actually doubted yourself?
So yeah, pretty much every week, I think.
Every week?
but I'd say that would be unhealthy not to do it. Like you'd be very arrogant and pretentious to believe that
you have value.
You have value and you figured it out. It's not because someone says it's interesting that you shouldn't doubt that. Like, and there's so many aspects of a business, right? Like how you sell it, how much you sell it, what is your business model, what is the product doing, are you focusing on the right thing, what should be the next features that you develop, like all of those, and especially when you're building a new business, you have absolutely no answer and no data point to rely on. So if you don't doubt yourself and you don't continuously test your assumptions and try and prove yourself wrong rather than trying to prove yourself right, then I guess you're not doing the right thing because you're going to end up in a war, in a place where you're like, no one wants to buy your product or it's too late. And so yeah, constantly, even when we have something that works, I'll try and I'll try something that I'm pretty sure will not work so that it validates that my idea was the first one. And sometimes you discover you get surprised with that. You're like, oh shit, it actually works better than what I thought.
Well, I mean, after hearing all this from you, I'm curious now again, right? How's your mental health, man? Because I think when you say that I doubt myself every week. All right.
So
And in today's world, all of us talk about mental health. We need to be positive and things like that. When you say that you doubt yourself every week, how do you actually overcome that mental resilience?
So first, I think maybe instead of using the word doubt, I think it's question, which is slightly different. It's not like I'm confident enough that I've worked and I've proven my value in many situations and all that. So I don't doubt that I have value every single day. Like I'm pretty confident that I can bring value to companies and understand their business. And if I do my homework, I don't doubt myself in that sense. But I question the company, what we do, and if we're doing the right thing every day so that I don't get stuck in a place where we don't evolve anymore. Especially in a business that's not yet established. Once you're called Google, that's much easier to say like, okay, we're doing the right thing, right? But until not until there, but until you get to a certain scale and it's running, and you know exactly what your product is and what you're selling, then you should be questioning yourself all the time. And then the point of mental health, I'm not a very big believer of the hustling 24/7, 7 days a week and not sleeping and I think if you want to keep your mental health, my favorite joke at the moment is I'm at kilometer 2 of an ultra marathon. So yeah, my legs don't hurt yet. Right? Yeah. Because so far so good. I've got positive feedback. We've sold a project, all that. But I know that's going to hurt at some point anyway. And if I keep going as fast as I can, sprinting through the next 2 kilometers, I'm going to fall before I'm even ever close to the finish line.
Yeah.
So pace yourself, do stuff that are not work, spend some time with my kid. I go do sports. I try and get a full night's sleep every day. There's days where your productivity is just not there. Try and do something else. And try and, like heads down, but one step at a time, because the road is super long. And if you start trying to overdo it, then next week you're going to be exhausted. And in 2 weeks, you're going to be so unproductive that then your mental health is going to be impacted, because you're going to be stressing out, you're going to make poor decisions, like everything's going to fall down like a carcass.
So maybe a little bit on a personal side, you did mention that you do sports. I remember you mentioned to us that you did a long hike in Japan. Was it Japan?
Yeah.
It was in Japan, right?
Family and all, right?
So maybe you can share a little bit about what do you do to recharge yourself,
Yeah, so
that's a really long hike, by the way.
So regular basis, I play beach volley every week. In Singapore, we are lucky that we have beaches everywhere. So I'm 15 minutes away from the closest beach from my home. And so every Friday, I finish the week by playing beach volley with my friend on sunset. So that's a fantastic way to recharge, and you get vitamin D and some good laughs, and stay away from the cell phone, and so that and you can't work while you're playing beach volley. It doesn't work. I've got a kid, 1 year old, so I try and spend as much time as I can with him, and I'm working from home very often, so I can squeeze a hug between 2 meetings, and that's another way to recharge. And then, with my wife, we love adventure, so we try and travel every now and then. We love kite surfing, so we go for kite surfing destination. We love hiking, so we went to Japan and we did that Kumano Kodo trail with the baby in the backpack. So we walked like more than 25K, the baby in the mountains and all that.
And how old was the baby?
He was, I think the time it was 6 or 7 months.
6 or 7 months, yeah. All the way, 25 click.
25 click.
Wow. Drive the distance, but I won't walk. I won't hike the distance.
But you can't drive there. There's no road. No, but like to each his own, right? Like it doesn't matter what you do as long as you do something, and it has to do a lot with the creative process as well.
Yes,
if you think about how creativity works, and creativity in the sense. For Tilly-san, he likes the definitions of what creativity is. Your capacity to create new stuff out of nowhere, which is basically your capability of connecting new dots together.
Right.
Okay.
In order to connect new dots together, you need to have inspiration. You need to have a lot of dots so that you can find the one that hasn't been connected yet, right? And that means that if you only work all day with the same client on the same product all the time, your inspiration goes zero. Your creativity goes to the ground, because you've got no new data, no oxygen, nothing else coming from the outside. And it doesn't matter what you do, as long as like you read. I read a lot as well. Sometimes it's fiction, sometimes it's stuff about the industry, sometimes it's stuff about different industries. It doesn't matter. Try and find like ways to actually give oxygen to your brain, and all of a sudden you'll come up with solution you didn't even know like you could come up with. And sometimes it's just like by reading, I don't know, you read something about like a record breaker, like it could be someone drinking more beer than anybody else, or someone breaking a sports world record. But all of a sudden it creates a connection in your mind. You're like, wait, that's the way I'm going to do it. And that's where it comes from. So whenever you're stuck, just like go away from your computer and look for inspiration somewhere else. And I think that has to do a lot with mental health, because you're not stuck and you can breathe again.
Right.
Wonderful advice.
I'm so absorbing, right? In case all this are wondering, why am I like so quiet all of a sudden? Because I'm absorbing the whole thing. Can't even speak properly right now, because that brings a lot of sense to me, because that's what I do on a normal basis. If I get stuck, right, I'll just cast it aside, I'll go for a walk and things like that, and probably an hour later I'll come back to it, I start to whole thing will be out, right, in less than half an hour or so. So I do.
A lot of people do it without realizing it. But
so
once you know what it
is to go to the underwater world.
Yes. So I love going to the aquarium. So aquarium is where I get my ideas from, inspirations from. The other one is the shower. Yeah. So my parents, my fiance, my wife, right, they always complain that
it takes so long to shower.
My water bill is going to be very high. Right, because I'll end up.
That's the only thing you do inside the shower, right?
I'm showering, I have a mirror there, I'll start drawing things. That's why I thought of something, I just take out my phone and start typing. It does, but that's mine.
No, but again, it doesn't really matter the way you do it, as long as you do it. It's about disconnecting from your day-to-day and looking elsewhere.
Right. So speaking of which, I think inspiration, right? Maybe you can share also how Singapore Fintech Association can help to inspire some of the fintech startups in Singapore to overcome their natural challenges through your experience with SFA.
Yeah. So
I think you mentioned a little bit about the connecting with the ecosystem. That's powerful, right?
So I've been building communities for the longest time as well. So I think
we have a lot to learn from him.
That's where I identify as well a lot with that. I think, especially for entrepreneurs is a very lonely job, right? Like you're at home and like no one else understands what you're doing, including your wife, your fiance, your partner. Most of the time you're on that lonely journey. And so one way that I like to extend the capacity of my brain is by meeting other people, right? And so meeting peers, meeting people that could be client providers, people that are doing completely different stuff, but that could apply to what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I think an association like the Singapore FinTech Association is doing kind of this job as well, like to bring people together so that you can meet mentors, you can meet clients, you can meet providers, you can mentor people if you're senior enough or like you're an expert on your topic.
Right.
You can find co-founders if you're a startup. You can learn from other startups and as much from the success than from their failure. Failures probably instructs even more.
Yeah.
But also from the larger business, right? Like not large business also fail in many ways, and so you can learn from that. So I think it's really getting exposure to much more than what is in the room that you used to work and those four walls.
Yeah. So you mentioned mentorship.
Yeah.
And I want to touch on that, right? How is it important, or rather, because you've been through a corporate side in Google, and right now as an entrepreneur, right, you're running a company itself. How important is mentorship?
So I'll be very honest. I don't really have mentors myself, or people that I would call such way. But it's probably because I'm so connected, and because I've done that all my life, right? I've been networking the entire life. So what I'll do is like every now and then, especially when I'm stuck, what I try to do, for instance, my moment is lunchtime. I know that I'm going to have lunch every day, and if I don't do anything, I'll have lunch by myself, my table. And I like to take a break, like to re-oxygenate. So I'll try and have lunch with someone different every day. So instead of having maybe like one specific mentor, I'll try and connect with people that I find inspiring or good at what they do.
So you have many mentors in a sense.
I have like so many mentors. And I say like this is an extension of my brain for me because they know a lot of stuff that I don't. And so first, what I prefer is actually asking the lot of questions.
Right.
For once, I'm speaking about myself, but most of the time I try and get the juice out of other people because you learn a lot from them.
Okay, so what are the common questions that you normally ask them?
I love asking about people's challenges and what they're working on at the moment, but more like where they're feeling like they've either just fixed a big challenge or the next challenge that they're working on. I think that's usually quite revealing. Something they're very proud of as well is usually like, something they usually worked enough so that they'd be proud of having achieved after that. Those are some of the questions I like.
Right. So I'm going to go back to a part where I think we compare between an entrepreneurship where you are now as well as your job in Google as a staff, right? What's the difference?
How long do we have?
As long as you want.
I think the first one is, and it's funny because at the time, I think at Google, like people had the idea that if you worked at Google, you were an entrepreneur. So that's even more fun to answer this question because I realized how much I was not an entrepreneur. I think what Google gave me was the ability to think big and to think big and to really tackle ambitious problems, right? Tackle ambitious challenges. Not just incremental 2%, but really to think of like, hey, if we wanted to do that 100x, how do we do it? Because then it forces you to actually imagine how you're going to do it differently. But what happens when you become an entrepreneur is that first, your work doesn't come every day by email, right? You're in a large company. You have a chain of email that come and like, so your boss, the peers, the other departments you're working with, and you always have like a continuous movement and you have objective. And so your work is coming to your table every day naturally, organically. When you're an entrepreneur, if you don't do anything, nothing comes.
Nothing moves.
Like you need to create your own job.
Yep.
Because if I don't do anything all day, nothing's going to happen.
Yep.
Right. And the next day, even less. And then in 3 days, everyone has forgotten about me because nobody actually cares that I exist, right? And what I'm building. So you kind of have, and that's kind of like confusing at the beginning. I think that was one of the biggest disorientation that I had at the beginning was like, what do I do with my day? Like I've got so many stuff I could think of, but I don't really know where to start.
Right.
And then comes the time where you've actually managed to prioritize. And so prioritization is a big one. It's not done for you. And then next one is like, all right, I think we should do that. And then you have no one to actually validate what you're doing and tell you that this is the right choice or not. and then you have no resources whatsoever. So I used to have a huge marketing budget at Google, and now I have a negative marketing budget. And yeah, so you can have, especially at the beginning, like if you're talking early stage, you have to do everything by yourself.
Yes.
You have to learn about a bunch of stuff because you don't have a marketing department, you don't have a finance department, you don't have an HR department. You're all those departments, right?
Right.
And so you have to learn about stuff you never knew you wanted to learn about, and to kind of like develop new stuff. So that makes you much more broad.
Mm-hmm.
But then that's where it's also super important to have the support network. And I see communities like that, or like the insurance, the SFA.
SFA.
I see that as your support network. Whenever you don't know, think that someone in the community has had this problem before.
Right.
Someone must have gone through this. Right? And actually it's funny, like, because once you manage to leverage that network, you get the answer much faster than you ever if you were a large company.
Right.
Yeah.
So now I've got a few communities. If I have a problem about pretty much anything, I can have the answer in 15 seconds.
Wow.
I challenge you to find that in any big company. There will be someone ready to help me and give me like insight, and they're good at what they do, right? So I know this is reliable.
Yep.
And there's probably like 3 or 4 people, and because they don't have conflict of agenda and all that, and they just want to help me out, then you'll have the answer very quickly.
Right.
But I think that's one of the biggest differences.
So that's the whole network that you had that actually helps you in terms of success. Is that right? Right. And of course, in the corporate side, people are just wanting to do their own thing, and that's it. So that's the big difference that we're looking at.
And people do what they paid for in a large company. And sometimes you find people that are a bit more curious, a bit more interested by other stuff. But a lot of people are just doing that, and they're very busy doing that as well. And they have KPIs, and if they don't do that, they won't be paid for that, or like they get fired or whatever. And so they will really much focus on that. And some of them are playing like not really team players, and so they just don't care about you. Mm-hmm. But in the outside world, people who chose to speak to you, or because they're in the same situation, they don't have this kind of agenda. They're like, I'll help you because I like you. Right? And I know this topic anyway, so it doesn't cost me much to help you.
With that said, then how do you actually ensure that you and your team, because you do continuous learning, through all the things you just mentioned. But what about your team? How do you ensure that they continue to learn and innovate? Because the industry that you are in, it's fast paced.
Yeah. So I think the first thing is how you hire people, right? You need to hire people with a growth mindset. Otherwise, like in my opinion, it's not going to work. Right? If you have someone that just want to do one job, it's just not fit for the startup world. It's just not the way it works. Like every day your job change, kind of reinvent it all the time anyway. And then I think it's the way you set KPIs. So Google is actually really good at that, or used to be. I don't work there anymore, but you used to set KPIs on like if you wanna be paid for your salary, you do your job, right? You meet your boss expectation.
Okay.
You want to get promoted, you need to go beyond your boss expectation. That's another word for innovating. And so if you set people's big objective and you set them big challenges to solve, tell them this is your job. But if you want to go beyond, and if you want to get paid more, if you want to get promoted, you'll need to come up with something that I didn't think of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In fact, I wanted to ask, so there's this word growth mindset that's thrown around quite often, but what exactly does it mean to you or from you? Right? Because people listening to it just say, growth mindset. So, but what does it mean? I think to entrepreneurs, growth, so it's a different meaning.
Growth mindset is the opposite of a fixed mindset, right? And fixed mindset is
stubborn.
I've got a job. It's not necessarily stubborn, but I've got a job. I do it well, and I'll continue to do it. Mm-hmm. And that's the famous, like we've always done it this way. So I don't know why I would change.
Okay.
Growth mindset is like whatever I'm doing, I'm going to question whether there's a way to do it better, right? So if I have a fixed mindset, I'm doing 80% of my target, and I'll try to get to my 100%. If I'm there, like that's fine, like job done. A growth mindset will have a target and okay, I want to reach 100%. Once I'm at 100%, what does 120 looks like? What does 150 look like? What does 400 looks like? Right? And the growth mindset is really like, okay, I know how to get to 100 now.
Yeah.
But why should I stop?
Yeah. Why should I stop?
And how can I do like to actually push those walls and get to a bigger place? I think that's really the best way to
explain that. Okay. So what kind of advice would you give to young entrepreneurs who are starting out but feel overwhelmed by challenges, having a growth mindset or?
But growth mindset is, I think it comes down to one very simple stuff. Be curious about everything. I think the growth mindset actually comes from that. Like it's being curious about everything that happens, right? You've been doing your job forever, and then all of a sudden you hear about Gen AI. Wait a minute, could we use that to do what we're doing better? And if it's not Gen AI, it's something else, doesn't matter. But you're doing your job. Do you really understand every single part of your job? Can you go deeper in something? Some of your clients are doing one way, some of the clients are doing another way. Could you serve them differently? Like, it's really about like exploring avenues and continuing to be curious and to think like, okay, I'm never at the destination. So I think that's, and for young entrepreneurs at that, but I think for youngster, especially the new generation, I think there's an element of patience as well that's needed.
Patience.
You can't change the world just after going out of school. You need to learn the trades. You need to actually become good at what you're doing. That takes some time. It's not because you don't have the biggest responsibility in the company that what you're doing is useless. You're actually learning something. And because you're learning to do it and to do it well, you will understand much better. You will gain depth. And once you got those depths and you manage to find gaps that no one has seen before, that's where you'll be able to change the world at your level, and then little by little, bigger and bigger. But you first need to really become good at what you're doing. And I think sometimes when I meet the younger people, like they kind of like lack this patience. They want to go big like right away. But then that's kind of like
so let's have a little bit of fun here, right? Yeah. So if let's say I were to turn back time and go back to you yourself, right, at the age of 20 years old, what would you have done differently?
Come to Singapore earlier.
Probably not. I had a really good fun with what I did. Right? So, it's an interesting question. What would I do differently? I tend not to regret too much. And like there's a reduction of cognitive dissonance where once you've made a decision, you find all the possible explanation of why you should have done that, right? I think maybe I would have become an entrepreneur before. I would have tried and launched a business before that, I think maybe.
Wait, in your 20 years old, or?
Maybe not in my 20s, because I would be like the opposite of the advice that I just gave, but maybe I would have left Google maybe slightly earlier. Yeah. But I don't regret it, but I think that maybe I know what I would do, but like it's not my 20s, but I think when I left Google, I actually went to work. I was the first employee of a startup. I didn't have a product yet, and I was supposed to do marketing in a language that wasn't mine, in a company that didn't have a product, and so and I was terrible at it. And I think I added absolutely no value to that company, and they added no value to my thing. So I think I would probably go a bit more gradually. I would probably I should have joined like a company like Airbnb, like a tech company that was trendy but not yet so big, and kind of learn, like, instead of jumping from high to the ground and lose a bit of time. I think I would have been a bit more gradually. Again, like to learn a bit better the trades.
Right. Because I think for today, in this very world where we talk about innovation, right? And in your aspect, right, you were a professor for creative leadership and design thinking, right? So I want to pose this question to you, is that, I mean, many of the young ones today, they are overwhelmed by challenges, right? And for you seem very positive, because posing you the question to turn back time, you said, I have nothing. I'm very happy with my life, right? What sort of advice would you give to the young ones on overcoming challenges at that age?
Well, first, going back, that doesn't mean like, I don't regret anything, but doesn't mean I didn't go through challenges, right? So I think there's a lot of time where I was in a terrible place where, like at the ATM, I wouldn't get any money, or like, I'd be like, so, and I had like times where I had 2 jobs and stuff. So
That was as an entrepreneur?
No, before even that. Like I left business school and I was in the red, and then I had to pay a business,
study loans,
and then I had like a job that wasn't paying so well yet. And so I had like some tricky moments like that were made by choices as well. So I think like, now that I'm here, I don't regret it because it took me where I am.
Yes.
But there was a part where overcoming that challenge was actually part of the learning process, right? And I think embracing those is actually part of what makes you what you are. So that's why I don't regret it, because I don't think I would be the same person, maybe not know everything that I know now if I didn't go through those periods, right? So back to your question of, I'm not studying, I'm trying to make sense of the question, right? But an advice for young people that are overwhelmed by challenges, I think embrace them.
Embrace challenges.
Jump 2 feet in them. There's with design thinking, there's something that we talk about where the chances of you becoming a poor person with a big disease and where people throw rocks at you and you're like the worst situation you could be, it's pretty much the same as you becoming a billionaire overnight, right? And so whatever you do, if you put your heart into it and you put enough effort and you're not the stupidest person on earth, which there's only one, right? So you're most of the time you're second. The worst case scenario is like you're second stupidest, right? But there's someone more stupid than you. Means like even if you're just in the average or everything, if you put enough effort and you spend enough time working on something, you'll get somewhere between 3 and 6 out of 10.
Right.
And then from there, you'll be smart enough to observe what's happening and to improve that to the next level, right? So whatever the challenge is, it's not that bad. And you will find a solution that will take you to a better place than you are now. And if you're patient enough, you can actually overcome pretty much everything you want, right? And doesn't mean you have to do it by yourself as well. Like I can't count the number of times where people have helped me, gave me a hand and pulled me out of like a tricky situation, right? Either by lending me a bit of money, either by giving me a roof when I didn't have one, either by helping me find a job, either by, I don't know, like so many people over time. So ask for help, listen to what people tell you and work hard and just try and find solution, right? And if what you're trying doesn't work, then stop and try something else. Iterate and until you find a way that gets you out.
So speaking of challenges, I recently had a conversation with someone who said that, in the past, before Gen AI, it took him about 3 months for a POC, a concept. But in today's time, it's going to take him 3 weeks to provide a POC. In fact, when he goes back to his team, he talks about get it done in the day because that's the speed of which the development happens. And so it's a extremely competitive industry, right? The tech industry. So how do you think the young entrepreneurs can navigate, the challenges of starting something new in this space, right? Especially with tech and finance.
And I'm in the same situation, right? I joke that I have 2 employees now. It's ChatGPT 1 and ChatGPT 2.
2 windows.
So it's helped me to go to the same result much faster, doing research and all that. And it also gives you something that you didn't have that much before, is the ability to fail very quickly because you can ask the wrong question. Before, if I had to do some research on something and then after 2 weeks of research, I realized that I didn't find the answer, that means I didn't do the right research. But sometimes you can afford for another 2 weeks, right? And so now you can ask question, it didn't work. I'll find a new question that took you 70 seconds. But I think what Gen AI is not yet capable of doing is what I was talking about before, like the ability to connect new dots together.
Creative.
Right?
Yeah.
So yes, you can ask question, but the answer is only as good as the question you ask. And so if you can ask only shallow question about something you don't actually really understand, then the answer will not have that much value. Right? Your friend is able to do POCs in that little time because he knows exactly how to prompt the Gen AI to bring the type of answer that he will be able, again, in turn, to turn into something of value for his clients, right? But without the right question and without the understanding of the answer so that you can apply it to something, it's worthless. And so Gen AI today is a bit of it's a Google on steroids, right? It's a Google search on steroids. You have not only an answer, but like a much more applicable version of it. But then that gives you 2 superpowers: the power to learn much faster about something and go deeper much faster and get better answers. And then the ability to actually turn your ideas into something as long as you explore the way to do it, right? So you could code something much faster, you could, but then that doesn't deploy your application in the ecosystem, right? So there's still a lot of stuff that are not done by Gen AI. It's not, and as usual, when you have something like be trendy, like people think it's magic and it's going to solve every world's problem, but I see it, like I use it much better, but then when I go to my clients, first, they don't all use Gen AI, and second, they don't all have the experience that I had before that allows me to ask those questions very, very fast, right? So I think that's where it's good. Like, be curious, learn about a bunch of stuff, but try and find new connection that the Gen AI will not naturally do, that no one naturally does before as well.
So with that connection, right, how do you see the fintech evolving in Singapore? Especially when Nova AI is looking into Novo AI is going up with the rise of innovations, going through claims and things. How do you see fintech evolving in Singapore?
So and that's a strategic decision, right? So I'll tell you in 5 years if it was a good one. But the way we see it, we think like going vertical is one way to actually avoid to become irrelevant overnight. if you really understand, like the finance industry wasn't born yesterday, the insurance industry wasn't born yesterday, any other industry, like it's the result of layers and layers of building and creating stuff. And insurance is a good example. Like there's so much layers, it's so much complexity. The actuary is it's an old time data scientist, right? And so the technology will not replace them overnight. What it will replace is a job that shouldn't be done by humans in the first place. But wherever you have gray matter and people actually thinking and trying to create stuff that will protect people, then you will still need like humans that actually understand the industry. And so understanding the industry, the point of friction, and automating what can be automated so that people can spend more time doing what the insurance industry is supposed to do, which is protect people from the risk out there, then the industry is just going to get better at what it does and will do it faster and hopefully cheaper. But you still need a lot of people in there. And same for the fintech and insurance tech industry. What we can do is actually find those stuff that can be changed. And against the own industry perspective, because all the time they'll tell you like, oh no, technology will never be able to solve that, but because they don't understand what the technology is capable of doing. And so it's really working hand in hand and say, okay, tell me what's really terrible about your job right now, and maybe I can focus on that while you're doing what you like to do and where you're really, really valuable.
So in your opinion, what do you think makes, because you have a huge wealth of experience all over the world, what makes Singapore an ideal environment for fintech innovation?
I don't think it's an ideal environment. I don't think any environment is ideal. No, but like really, like if
ideal for you, maybe.
Yeah, not even for us. I think if you idealize it, then you will fail because you will think like it's gonna make it easy.
Yeah,
I think where it's really good, it's that you can do business fast. Like I used to live in Sao Paulo, where if you had 2 meetings during the day, you were happy with your day. Right? Here I can have 7 and still have time to work on the side.
Right.
So that's fantastic. You have access to decision maker. You have a lot of headquarters that are here. It's technology it's a technology friendly place, right? Like where the country itself is trying to promote technology.
Yep.
And the government and the leaders of the industry, both on the government side and the corporate side, they're actually keen on transforming the industry digitally, right? So I think those make it like a very friendly environment for building business.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, with that, what message do you have for any young budding entrepreneurs in Singapore who wants to collaborate with the Singapore Fintech Association? Because I think based on what I'm hearing from you, the Singapore Fintech Association seems to be a good ground for them to build a business.
I think whatever industry you're in, you should look for the references, right? And so the SFA is one of the references of the industry. It's the association that gather the entrepreneurs from these things. So that's the fastest way to connect with your peers and people that actually matters in your industry. So you should definitely join that.
Yeah. So for you guys out there, right, if you are curious and been thinking very hard, I think you should give the opportunity, right, and join the Singapore Fintech Association because this is where things are going. This might be a ground for you to actually build a success. Right. So back to you, Julien. In every single guest in my podcast, in this recording itself, we always ask our guests this very particular question, which is, if there's one word that you can actually give to all inspiring young entrepreneurs out there, what would that word be and why?
Resilience.
Resilience, why?
And to the point of obsession, I would say.
Obsession.
Yeah, because if you want to be an entrepreneur, you're going to have to go through an emotional roller coaster. You're going to face a bunch of challenges. And even if you do every single thing right, everything right, eventually you might fail. So if you're not resilient, your chances are below 0, right? So, and resilience is the ability of like continuing after you've basically taken doors in your face, and you're like, okay, I've just taken 3 doors in my face. I'm going to open a 4th one, and I'm going to open a 5th one, and I'm going to open a 6th one, and a 10th one, right? Until I find one that is actually open. But the truth is, like, you can't find that door that's open until you've got all the other one in your face and you've broken your nose 3 times, right? And that's kind of like what the entrepreneur journey feels like sometimes.
Yes.
And if you don't have it in you, maybe you're just not made to be an entrepreneur, but that's what awaits you, right? Now, the reward is really cool because like you'll have some sort of freedom and you'll have the feeling that you're working on something that matters like nowhere else. And I can talk about it because I've been both sides. But yeah, it takes energy and persistence and to the point of obsession where sometimes you feel like you should just give up, but you need to keep going.
right? So, ladies and gentlemen out there, right, the word here that Julien gave us is resilience, right? So before we end the whole show, right, maybe I will put your focus into this camera here, right, and maybe leave all the young entrepreneurs out there or one piece of advice for them to carry on throughout their whole journey. Any parting words, anything?
So we talked a little bit about curiosity. So I think curiosity is probably one of your best quality, because that's going to help you whenever you're stuck to kind of like look for different avenues. And curiosity will also allow you to actually take different jobs, take different missions, try different things that will eventually tell you what you're really good at and where you should actually spend your time and grow your career. And sometimes, and I think a good example, right? Like, I've probably had like 3 different careers already, and where I changed like completely what I was doing. I went from sales to marketing to products. I've had different businesses, and now I'm back to actually selling in a different way. So at some point it all comes together, but like curiosity really is what's going to help you.
Thank you very much, Julien. Right?
Thank you.
In fact, right, I will invite you for another podcast session because our time is so limited. There's so many questions here that I couldn't
bunch of
cover.
questions that we haven't covered.
Yeah, and that's the time that we had. So in fact, I would want to invite you again, right? And want to talk in depth about creative leadership, design thinking, right? So to our viewers out there, in case you guys don't know, Julien is also the entrepreneur in residence for the Embassy of France in Singapore, where he is an expert in innovation and technology.
I have. That was a one year
it was
thing.
a 1 year stint, right? So there's a lot of things that we need to talk to him about, innovation, technology. But once again, thank you very much, Julien, for that's all the time we have for
Thank
today.
Thank you so much for having me. That was really
Thank
fun.
you.
Thank you, guys.
This episode is brought to you by MESSION in collaboration with the Singapore FinTech Association, supported by the Asia Tech Subcommittee. I do hope that this podcast has ignited your mission, so do join us for more stories behind the future of finance from successful individuals on Mission Ignite. Hi guys, thank you for listening. If you like what you have just heard, follow us for more content like this.